I pledge allegiance Thank you. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Dickey,
Here.
Vice Mayor Charno,
Here.
Councilmember Tolis,
Here.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Magazine,
Here.
Councilmember Lacrone,
Present.
Councilmember Spellich.
Present.
Thank you very much. The first item are our reports by mayor, council members, and town manager. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, I have two announcements tonight. One, I'd like to introduce our newest member to our staff. If Farhad can come up. Farhad Tavasoli is our newest employee. He is our senior planner. You probably recall Marissa Moore. She was our senior planner previously. She left us in December to take on a new opportunity. Farhad has worked as a planner for Maricopa County for the past 5 years. Before that, he worked as a project manager for the Flood Control District of Maricopa County and as a planner for the City of Goodyear. Farhad is active in the Arizona Planning Association, holds both an undergraduate and graduate degrees in urban planning from Arizona State University, which, good job. That's a great school to go to. Farhad went to high school in Scottsdale, where he and his family currently reside. So welcome. We're very pleased to have you. I know we're all going to see you at a number of upcoming, probably contentious items that are going to be before council. So good luck to you on that. But we're very fortunate. He has quite a bit of municipal and county experience that I think is very relevant to us. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you all.
The next item has to do with the coronavirus. I just wanted to let the council and the public know here. You've been obviously reading and seeing a lot on the television news about the coronavirus, and I wanted to just let you know that our town, like most other cities and towns around the country, are in the midst of trying to plan and have a preparedness plan in place. Basically, our focus at this point is to follow what is happening and take the lead from both CDC and our local, our county health and state health departments. We right now are following best practices, and we also have an emergency operations plan that we follow. We have an infectious disease component of that. We also have a continuation of operations of government as a portion of that, so we're focusing on that. So our two emphasis is on the organization, which is our employees and us as an employer, but also on the community and the residents who live here in town, and trying to continue to try to serve them and try to make some best decisions both for the community and for the organization. So as more and more starts happening, unfortunately, I think that this is going to probably become a slightly larger issue in Arizona than what we've seen recently. But I want to let you know that we're vigilant. We're going to stay on top of this, and then we will come back and make reports periodically to the council and to the public. But I think the council and the public should feel very comfortable and very confident that the staff and I are doing everything we can to protect everybody as best we can. Of course, we also rely on everybody to follow the best practices, as you've been seeing on the television news and newspapers. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, but I think that's all I have really on as far as reports.
Councilman?
Yeah, Grady, any coordination or communication with cities and towns in the valley?
Yes, in fact, I had an East Valley managers meeting yesterday, which was all the East Valley city managers. And we all discussed what we were doing, and what I'm doing tonight is what all of them have done. They've also sent out emails to their employees. We have one that is in draft form that will be going out tomorrow. So I feel like very confident we're doing the right thing. We've also been in touch with the county health department, and we're following all the practices that, what I call best practices that they have outlined for cities and towns. So, good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman?
Briefly, thank you, Grady. I appreciate, well said, and I appreciate that we are addressing it, at least speaking about it. I work for Maricopa County, and we got an email as an employees today, too. And so just as an employee or someone in the state and working with an employer, it's good just to hear that it's on people's minds, and it's no reason to panic, but they're watching it. So I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. Do you have anything else, Grady?
That's all.
No? Oh, thank you. Mike, any news?
Thank you, Mayor. Had a Valley Metro meeting the other week, and basically another lengthy executive session, but we did come out and approve a contract extension for Scott Smith. He's the CEO of Valley Metro, and for those who might not know, Valley Metro oversees the bus system in the Phoenix metro area as well as the light rail. So that is done, and looking forward to the presentation tonight. We did talk a little bit about Prop 500 at our meeting as well, so that's going on. And then went to the PTO gala Saturday evening. It wasn't really official capacity, but it was fun, and I think PTO raised a lot of money for help the school district, so it's always a good time.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilman?
On February 21st, I was invited by the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community to the unveiling of the USS Arizona Memorial Gardens. This memorial honors the men who served aboard the USS Arizona that sank December 7, 1941, during the attack on Pearl Harbor. The Salt River Indian community became the recipient of a large part of the superstructure, which was later identified as the original boathouse. This is the largest and only piece ever given to a tribal community. The memorial spans the exact length and width of the USS Arizona. President Martin Javier welcomes all residents of Fountain Hills to tour the memorial gardens, and he appreciates the deep friendship that his community shares with Fountain Hills. The memorial is located behind the outfield at Salt River Fields Park. As many of you know, that my dad was a naval pilot at Pearl Harbor, and it was very special and very moving for me to attend, and I really tell you guys it's something that everyone should experience. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We really appreciate you going, and I know that the next day was when they opened it to the public, and that was the deluge day, so I'm really glad that you were able to go, but now I think anybody can go. Yeah, that would be awesome. A few other things. Wanted to congratulate Fountain Hills High School's own J.P. Cahill, who's from our McKee branch, our Mary Ellen and Robert McKee branch of Boys and Girls Club. He was honored, recognized at the Celebrate Youth Gala the other night. Everybody at the table, I was happy to sit there with the Fountain Hills folks. There were a lot of strong supporters there. One of the auction items, but we couldn't get it, was to spend the day with some coyotes and some diamondbacks and all kinds of people, and Oliver Ekman Larson was there. They give a ton to the organization. It was so great to see all the kids. There were probably a dozen or so give their stories, give their speeches. They learned so much how to act with poise and professionalism, and it was very, very wonderful. And you might remember that former late Mayor Wally Nichols was a big supporter of that. And when I was on the school board, and that had been our administration building, and then we gave it gladly to the Boys and Girls Club, and it was very easy to see why that was so important to him. El Mirage Mayor Alexis Hermosillo had invited me to go to a different event for the YWCA. She's on that board, and they also were honoring youth and community leaders. Of course, we had the Chamber's Spring Fountain Festival of Arts and Crafts, and that was great. We had one rainy day, but everything else was very wonderful. The flyover for late Mayor Sharon Morgan worked out. They were going to do it on Saturday. They did it on Sunday, and it was picture perfect. If anybody was able to see it, it was executed very well. We had our retreat, and we we're in the community center for just a few hours, and it's online if you want to see it. But there's a lot of good information, and we're happy to hear what you think of it, or some of the steps that we're going to take in the future, or what we're looking at. I also went to a MAG meeting, a regional council, and I'm so happy to have Fountain Hills Audra Kester Thomas here that will be presenting to us on Prop 400. We had a general plan meeting with John Wesley right here in this room. That's moving along, something that's pretty important. We really hope that everybody takes the time to take a look at it, because it'll be on the ballot in November. Munchin Music, that was a wonderful event for the Civic Association, and I think they had 400 chairs out and had to bring more, so that was really cool. And last, our Economic Development Director, James Smith, and I attended the Canada-Arizona Business Council meeting, which this time was at the zoo, so that was pretty neat. They have that stone pavilion, I guess. And we learned about it's like the new NAFTA, which is the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, and how that it will affect cities and towns in the country, and a lot of real estate opportunities and business opportunities to try to understand as it moves forward. And that's it. Anything? Thank you so much. We now going to pass the baton from our wonderful Vice Mayor Sherry LaCrone, who we're so grateful for your service. We're very happy that you were able to do that. And now it's time for Mike Charno, who's my ribbon cutting buddy. So now he'll get to do it even more. So we thank you, Mike, for wanting to do this. And I don't know, we don't do that right now, or we'll switch the signs later. But thank you, and look forward to your service.
I have a 20-minute speech prepared, but Councilman Spellich said I should hold off, so I'm going to.
He edited it for you, huh? Thank you. Next, we have a very special presentation. We're the Town of Fountain Hills Citizen Life Saving Award. I wanted to recognize the courageous actions of two men, Mr. Randy Evans and Mr. Joseph Callow. I'm going to ask Chief Ott and Captain Kratzer and the gentleman to meet me, and the captain and the chief will explain the events, and we'll honor our gentlemen. So if Mr. Callow and Mr. Evans could join us, we would love that. Thank you so much. So let's hear what happened that evening from the professionals, and then we'll give you a nice recognition that you deserve. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I think it's important to recognize these two individuals for taking some measures that may have saved two people's lives on the night of the 21st of February. So it was approximately 3 in the morning. A vehicle traveling at a high rate of speed collided with a parked car on El Pueblo. So Mr. Callow and Mr. Evans, here in the collision, went outside and they saw a vehicle that was disabled. And so they were able to, one of the vehicles that contained the occupants had a flame that was starting to come out from the vehicle. So they quickly ran over to the vehicle and were able to pull the driver and the passenger out. So Mr. Callow pulled out the driver, excuse me, and Mr. Evans pulled out the passenger. It's important to note that within a few minutes, MCSO and fire arrived within just minutes, and by the time we arrived, the vehicle was fully engulfed. And that's important to note because the two individuals that were in the vehicle weren't really making any attempt to get out. They were injured, and they weren't really making many attempts to get out of the vehicle. So the occurrences of that night could have definitely been different. If not for their actions, we could have been looking at some serious burns or injuries or even death. So it was important for both fire and MCSO to the town know and have discussion about their actions and how we felt that those actions probably saved the lives of those two individuals that evening. So I'll turn it over to Chief Ott if he has any comments to make.
As usual, Captain Kratzer kind of said it all for us. So he's right. We transported both the patients with serious injuries, but none of them were burn related. So from our standpoint, that's key. It was, as he said, the vehicle was fully involved when we arrived on scene, and had they still been trapped in the vehicle, it would have had a completely different outcome. And it takes something a little special to be able to get up in the middle of the night and go out and do that and help somebody that you don't know. So we greatly appreciate that, and we have a small token of our appreciation for you.
Thank you. That's close to something I was going to say, which is we're so used to our first responders being heroes because they move towards what everybody else is running against or away from, and that is exactly precisely what you both did. So thank you. So I wanted to give you these certificates of award. They are recognizing your life-saving efforts and the appreciation that we in the town have for you. If you would like to take them, and if you want to say something, you're certainly welcome. You don't want? Take a picture here. Now we're going to take a picture, and thank you so much.
Hello, hello. So, you know, that night, I think about it every once in a while, but I think the way that I went out there, Randy went out there to help these two people, the most important thing to me is that girl has an 8-year-old son that she will be able to see again. So that's, you know, I have 3 daughters, my beautiful wife, Danielle, Gianna, Andrea, Mickey, she's not here, but they make me go, they make me do what I do, and to be that man, they help me strive every day. And I'm proud of what we did, and I'm proud that they have another chance. So I wish they were here, because I would tell them in their face, don't let me down for saving your butt, but we have another opportunity and make the best of it, right? So I would do it again. You come by my neighborhood, anyone is always welcome to our house. I come from an Italian background, so we make a lot of good food. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Gentlemen.
That's all right. They knew what I was going to do.
I know, but not everybody does. Thank you, guys.
That was something.
Kind of choked up a little bit. So we move from one wonderful thing to another. We're going to do our Students of the Month, our stellar students. I'm going to read all the names from up here this time, and then I'll come down and I will read the individual, what the teachers said about these wonderful students. We have from McDowell Mountain Elementary, we have Hannah Sodownik, also from McDowell. We have Nihash Rodriguez Cruz. From the middle school, we have Dalia Kuskiva. I'm sorry? Kuskiva. Thank you.
That's what she said.
I have it spelled out in front of me. And also from the middle school, Henry Clark. We have Stephanie Lees from the high school and Liam Goldman from the high school. You kids come on up. I'll read this and give you your certificates. Right over here, I have them on the table, and I'll read what they said, what some of your teachers said, and then I'll give them to you. How's that? Why don't you look out there so your families can see your nice faces. Hannah is being nominated because of her passion for learning, her daily dedication to improving the morale of other students, the fact that she is always doing the right thing, and because of her infectious, bright, and happy attitude. And I bet that's you, right? Thank you. Stay up here. Next is Nihash. He is also from McDowell Mountain. He is a stellar student in the STEM classroom and in his regular classroom and in the whole school for that matter. He always does what is expected of him academically and more. He's such a good friend to others and is the first one to offer help to a friend or a classmate whenever it is needed. Thank you, Nihat. Telling everybody to stay up here so we can get a picture of everybody. Next is Dahlia from the middle school. Dahlia has been very instrumental in helping her fellow 8th grade classmates. Her peers are aware that she was always willing to help them. She's very organized and takes great notes. When a classmate's not in school due to unfortunate circumstances or illness, Dahlia is always a great resource. She displays good citizenship in her own unique, quiet demeanor. She interacts positively with others and is very reliable and considerate of school staff and students. Dahlia, here's yours. Next is Henry Clark from the middle school also. Henry embodies the traits that make a good citizen. He's always extremely polite, well-behaved, and respectful. Henry easily befriends students. He demonstrates empathy for all, and as a result, students naturally gravitate to him. Henry's an excellent student, a skilled illustrator, Da Vinci style, that's shape, they added that. Creative writer and thinker, and takes the most detailed notes. He's an excellent student, but more importantly, he's an amazing human being. Wow. There you go, Henry. Oh, you're not, Henry's not. I'm sorry. So Henry's not here. And I was looking at him the whole time. Sorry about that. I'm sure you're an outstanding person, too. Well, next is Stephanie, so I know. Stephanie's from the high school. She's been a very impressive all-around student athlete on our campus for the last 4 years. She works hard in the classroom and is one of the top students. She's a leader in cross-country, basketball, and track. Her coach said his favorite memory was seeing Stephanie and a teammate win the state championship, that they were the MVPs that year. Stephanie's also involved in several clubs on campus, including Stugo and the executive board of the Key Club. She has over 100 hours of community service, consistently hardworking and dependable in all things. She takes initiative to do what needs doing, and she can always be counted on to go above and beyond. Stephanie is respected by her teachers and her peers and is a credit to her family, school, and community. Thank you, Stephanie. Liam, right? No. Okay, Liam from the high school. Liam is a kind-hearted and hardworking student who cheers on the successes of others and brings a smile to his teachers' faces every day. He has a positive attitude toward his peers and his teachers and is willing to take on any task assigned to him. He's very compassionate and has a knack for making people laugh. Musically talented, he's very good at singing harmony. Liam is always willing to provide a helping hand and is there for others when they need a friend. His cheer and humor are contagious. He's well liked among his peers because he is a most thoughtful, considerate, and respectful student, consistently kind and forgiving. He's an incredibly hard worker and also a futuristic thinker. Liam is quite simply an exceptional human being. See, I knew it. There you go. So, on behalf of the Town Council, we thank you all for being exemplary role models of citizenship to your fellow students and to your community. And if any of the educators would like to come on up, we'll take a picture with your students. You're most welcome to do that. Thank you so much. We'll get this to Henry. Already? You want to come up? No? Okay. Can you see everybody? You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Does that include all of us?
Thank you, everyone. So you've heard us talking about Proposition 400 a lot over the last months, and now we're going to hear it from the expert. We're going to get a presentation on Prop 400, the extension by Audra, and she is a Fountain Hills resident. She's a transportation planning program manager at the Maricopa Association of Governments that we're always saying up here, MAG. So welcome, Audra. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is in fact a treat. I don't often get to give a presentation to my own town council, and so it's a pleasure to be with you here tonight. The mayor asked that I give a brief update on where we stand in terms of the extension of Proposition 400, the regional tax that has really delivered the multimodal transportation network we enjoy throughout the region. I'm packing a lot of information into what I hope to be as short as possible of a presentation. I know you have a lot of business on your agenda tonight, but this is a valuable opportunity. I didn't want to waste it and want to make the mayor happy and try to do as best as I can provide the same kind of information we have over the course of the last several months been informing regional council about. So that I'm going to provide a little history. So I'm going to go back in history, give a little bit of a context, and then talk to where we're heading over the course of the next 5 years and really the next generation of transportation investments in our region. So wanting to start off with a friendly reminder of the planning area for the Maricopa Association of Governments. You'll see there all of Maricopa County, but also after the 2010 census, our urbanized area spread southeast and into what we call the Santan Valley here in the valley, and that required us, because we need a contiguous connection of our urbanized area, to increase the boundaries of our planning area into northern Pinell County. So MAG represents all of Maricopa County as well as City of Maricopa, the entirety of the Gila River Indian community, over to the town of Florence and up through Apache Junction. In whole, that's larger than the state of Massachusetts. For context, we're the second largest MPO, or metropolitan planning organization, in the country. We have a very large amount of responsibility and land ultimately to cover. So as I noted, I'm going to do a little bit of a history dive, talk about Propositions 300 and 400, but then talk to where we go from here, highlight a bit of the initial research that we have done to better understand where our constituents are interested in the future of transportation, also a little bit of a gut check on what we've done well, and then talk about where we stand in the planning process and where that looks over the course of the next 2 to 5 years. So starting with Propositions 300 and 400, for those of you who have been here for a few decades, you know the rapid pace of growth in the 70s and 80s resulted in a high need for transportation investments. In fact, Interstate 10, that goes coast to coast across the country. The last component of Interstate 10 was constructed in Phoenix, Deck Park Tunnel area in downtown Phoenix, and that was in the 1990s. So to demonstrate how long it took to deliver high-capacity investments, there was a heavy amount of need in the 70s and 80s. And when the federal government wasn't able to respond with funding to provide that infrastructure in terms of, at that point in time, highways and freeways, our mayors didn't want to sit idle any longer, could not sit idle any longer, and got together at the Maricopa Association of Governments and decided to roll up the sleeves and institute a tax to be able to deliver a freeway network. After initial discussions of a property tax, our business community helped land on a sales tax initiative, which was decided for a 20-year horizon at a half a cent. At that point in time, it was one of the first sales tax initiatives in the country. Today, as you may be familiar, it is what is used as a very frequent vehicle for delivering infrastructure investments across the country. But here at MAG, we were one of the first to deliver, in this case, a transportation investment program using the sales tax initiative. At that time, the intent of the Proposition 300 was to build the freeway network. In fact, the bumper stickers were "Build the damn freeways" at that point in time. You'll see here original illustration of the freeway network envisioned to be delivered with that half-cent sales tax. Proposition 300 at the time was approved by a margin of 72% of support. When you think of today's political climate in terms of the initiatives and ballot opportunities, that is an extreme margin for which really tells the story about how needed these transportation investments were. That was passed by voters in 1985. So after 20 years, our work was not done. We were still growing rapidly and needed to continue transportation investment into the region. Discussions in the early 2000s began, and a decision was made to extend another 20 years and another half-cent sales tax, in this case, that would be multimodal in nature. We needed to finish out the freeway network that we were unfortunately not able to complete under Proposition 300 and the projected revenues from it. We also wanted to grow a transit program. Notably, a part of that transit program is the 20-mile segment and then subsequent extensions of light rail through Phoenix, Tempe, and now into Mesa. In addition to that is the streetcar investment, which will be opening in Tempe here within a year, as well as investing in the arterial grid network. A major amenity in this region is the contiguous nature of our mile street grid network throughout a large portion of our region. It enables good transit, enables the free flow of movement of people from here to there. In fact, over half of the commuting public in the region uses the arterial grid network, not the freeway network, to move on their daily commute. Proposition 400 was passed by voters in 2004. This is what we were able to deliver with Propositions 300 and 400. You'll see in the colors of blue the openings of the freeway network. You'll see the loop system, Loop 101 and 202, would not have otherwise been delivered without the half-cent sales tax. You also see Loop 303 as part of Proposition 400. In the green and teal colors, the high-capacity transit investments. In this region, we have only implemented light rail and then ultimately streetcar in the next year, but have eyes on other transit investments into the future. This demonstrates some of the transit investment. What's an important note, and I'll touch on this in a few other slides, is the regional tax is a very small component of what is ultimately needed to deliver a regional transit network. The colors of purple illustrate the Proposition 400 funded investments, if you will. There's some lines there that are color of blue. That represents Prop 400 as well as local funding sources that have enabled those transit investments. And then you'll see the lion's share of these bus routes are indicated in the color of a green. That really represents wholly locally funded transit investments. Bottom line, if it isn't for our local cities, we would not have a regional transit network. The vast majority of funding comes from our local agencies. And then I noted the third component of Proposition 400, the arterial network. You'll see here illustrated several of the arterial investments included in that part of the portfolio. So our work still isn't done. We are the fastest fill-in-the-blank city, county, region, and we still need more investment in transportation. We also have some realities. Our infrastructure is no longer new, it's aging, and we are going to need to consider operations and maintenance components of the investments this region has already made. So I want to talk a little bit about the work that's underway, some of the work that we've already done, and then where we're heading in the near term. Last year, we ultimately did some research. We called it values mapping to better understand where constituents are, what they value most, so that we can preserve that in the plan, what they see in terms of future priorities associated with transportation, so we can build a plan that represents those priorities. And so I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about some of the research associated, or findings, I should say, associated with that values mapping research. We asked constituents how important is transportation as a regional priority, and what you'll see here is 98% of individuals either strongly agreed or somewhat agreed that it is a regional priority, investment in transportation. Not a surprise to us. I think we see a direct correlation to constituents in this region who observe and certainly like the transportation investments that they see, and so it's not a surprise that we see continued support as a regional priority. Perhaps more importantly, is we asked constituents whether or not there should be an augmentation in funding. Should we dial down the amount of money or increase it or keep it steady? And what you'll see here, 71% of those who completed in our research indicated either a small or a large increase in funding for transportation. What's notable about this particular conclusion is the research team that we had indicated nowhere else in the country when they've done this research have they seen such a high amount of support for increased funding in transportation. I want to caution you, while that's important to drive this conversation, perhaps some of the conversations we see currently at the legislature, we didn't ask detailed questions about tax burden or individual impact. What this does show is that our neighbors, our constituents understand how important transportation investments are to their ability to thrive, to be able to be in an economy that works for them, able to get to the educational or amenity choices throughout this large region. We asked more detailed questions where constituents thought we should increase or decrease funding. And you'll see here at the top of the list, it wasn't necessarily a surprise to us, that constituents want an increased amount of funding in safety and technology. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is when we're looking at making choices for the year 2050 and figuring out what those investments might look like 20 and 30 years from now, is technology is changing so quickly. Innovation in transportation, as well as just our daily economy, is happening at such a rapid pace that we want to make sure we build a long-range plan that we iteratively check in on and is able to adapt with changing technologies and circumstances. And I think that's certainly very different than the challenges the planners and engineers that came before me had when we didn't have as much fluidity ultimately in transportation decisions like this. But safety and technology likely will be a cornerstone of our next regional transportation plan. You'll see 66% wanting increased money for capacity, road maintenance and operations, and then a couple down you'll see also rail maintenance and operations. An important takeaway of this research is constituents want their tax dollars going towards the maintenance of the facilities they've already invested in. I think all of us have the experience of leaving this region and going to visit family, or having family come visit us from different parts of the country, and almost without fail, when I have visitors, they remark on the newness of our infrastructure, how well it's maintained compared to other parts of the country. I don't think it's lost on our neighbors either, and you see a heavy import for the maintenance and operation of the infrastructure we've already built. That is going to be an important consideration as we move forward, and certainly germane to some conversations that are in the legislature today. 56% wanting more funding towards new rail construction, buses and bus network, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure still being a high priority, as well as new street construction. So what does this tell us? A well-rounded multimodal portfolio is really what our constituents are looking for. Couple key takeaways from this initial values mapping research. Having a vision for transportation in the region is very important to constituents. There's a high amount of support for the work the region has and is doing. Folks don't necessarily know who's responsible for that vision. They see that there's a long-term commitment to infrastructure, most notably an example of Loop 202 South Mountain Freeway just opening. That's been on the books for a couple decades, in fact, a couple generations. And so it took long-range vision and, of course, commitment to deliver that important piece of infrastructure. While people don't necessarily know who's responsible, they know that there's long-range planning that exists in this region and commitment to staying the course. People in the region like how it was built. This is an important consideration for us. They love their communities. They pick and want to identify themselves with the community that they choose because of whether the culture, perhaps the amenities you have to offer. What they like is that there is a regional transportation investment that's been made that connects them to where they want to go, providing choice, mobility, and connectivity. Constituents do support shifting to a long-range program that does provide some flexibility to modified priorities based on changing circumstances and technologies. They get that things are changing and they want us to be nimble, government to be nimble, which hasn't always been the case. And that there's tremendous support for increased funding in transportation in this region, a distinctly higher amount of support than is found in other parts of the country. So let me talk to you a little bit about what we've uncovered in terms of long-range needs in this region. You'll see my subtitle there, Newsflash, Trade-offs Ahead. So this is a bit of a sobering part of this presentation, but I think it's important to recognize where we're starting out from as we look forward to the next 20 and 30 years worth of transportation investments. And here's probably the bad news slide of the night. It's to remind ourselves that the Great Recession was really painful to this region. Our friends up in Las Vegas and parts of Florida, we were hit the hardest when it comes to the Great Recession, and there's a direct correlation to the sales tax revenues that we are projected to anticipate over the course of this 20 years. This graph illustrates that we're projecting at this time a loss of about a decade worth of revenue over the course of that 20 years. About 40% less in revenue than we anticipated back in 2003. And the notable thing about both Propositions 300 and 400 is it's a specific list of projects. And so what that means when we don't have 40% worth of revenue, that means we've had to defer real transportation projects. We have not been able to complete freeway improvements. We have not been able to implement bus service because we do not have the revenues to do that. And so what this means for us in terms of this next extension of the proposition is this is a starting point. We're starting in a hole already, and we have a suite of deferred needs already on the books that we had committed to delivering over the course of this previous 20 years. At the same time, another really important component of our revenue package is gas tax, or the Highway User Revenue Fund, that goes towards both the capital investment as well as maintenance of our freeway network, an important revenue source for ADOT. We, the region, receive a portion of that funding. You, as a town, receive some of that funding, and it's a really important component of your portfolio for operating funds as it relates to your own roadway network. What this graph is here to illustrate is if we adjust for inflation, in 2000 we received more in gas tax funds than we did last year. It is a diminishing and unsustainable revenue source, in part due to fuel efficiency of the vehicles and, in fact, even the growing alternative vehicle source. At that same period, between 2000 and 2019, the state has seen an increase in population by 40%. Bottom line, we're using our infrastructure far more than we ever have, and each year we have less funding in order to maintain it, let alone expand it. What this ultimately does is create a really difficult conversation for us at a regional level, and the mayors associated with regional council have a really big choice ahead. The state has not moved on increase or an adjustment to the portfolio funding for highways and freeways or roadways. HERF, the gas tax, hasn't been increased since 1991. It is not indexed. We are one of the last states to increase our gas tax, and it is not a sustainable source. In Maricopa County alone, if there is no change in HERF, we see over the course of the next 30 years, $7 billion worth of unmet need. And this is just on highway and freeway infrastructure, a large component of which this region has funded. The trade-off question that our mayors, if there isn't a solution at the state legislature, will have to be faced is, one, do we continue to expand the system if the state isn't going to maintain it? And number two, how much longer will we wait to maintain the infrastructure that does have needed maintenance? And from a federal perspective, how do we answer to the federal government, who has also provided funding in order to enable the investments on the freeway network that really ultimately delivered what we have today? So when we look at what we already know is potential needs over the course of the next 25 years, we already know that there's $14.4 billion worth of freeway need. A lot of this comprises what we've had to defer out of the program because of the Great Recession, but also this talks to some of the expansion needs and modernization needs of the freeway network. It also talks to the growth expected to occur in the West Valley. Transit. We continue to see and hear a need for more transit investment in the region. This slide tells a couple stories that I think are really important for you to leave from tonight knowing. The half-cent sales tax, only a portion of it goes towards transit. And while the Vice Mayor knows this detail in great detail, I should say, when you carve that up, only 0.17 cents is dedicated to regional transit investment. You'll see illustrated on the other side of the slide, when you look at our peers, it is not uncommon to have a full cent or more going just to regional transit investments. Bottom line, in order for us to deliver the transit system that we do have today, we rely heavily on local community investments. The city of Phoenix alone contributes 70% of the local bus funding through their own sales tax of just short of a full cent. The takeaway from this slide is the region at a half cent alone, even if we dedicated all half of it, the entire half of it to transit, it is not enough to deliver the regional transit network that our now growing, booming region needs. Totaling this up, this is the sobering part of my presentation. We know that and have estimated between at minimum $50 and $60 billion worth of need looking out to the horizon year of 2050. You'll see on the other side of this ledger, we anticipate and have projected only $30 billion worth of revenue, and that's keeping the half-cent sales tax at a half cent. That's expecting no change in HERF revenue or gas tax revenue, and keeping very conservative projections on federal funding, which at minimum is tenuous and not something that we want to count on. We continue to see de-investment in federal funding, the gas tax at the federal level, and the Highway Trust Fund is running at deficit. It takes each year an obligation out of operating to keep that afloat. Transit investment continues to be marginalized as well. So while we've identified system-wide needs, currently we're also working with our member agencies, language we use to talk about our towns, cities, counties, native nations that are part of Maricopa Association of Governments. We want to best identify the universe of potential transportation needs that exist throughout our region. And so cities, towns, our counties are currently in a call for projects, submitting their ideas for projects that are needed through the next 25, 30 years, program ideas on new things we should be funding or considering as we look forward to the next series of, or generation, I guess, of investments. And we're soliciting this feedback through the end of this month, working with our member agencies all along the way. So what are we going to do with all this information, and how do we drive towards ultimately a new plan and some decisions associated with future investments? This is a high-level review of the next 5 years. We are currently targeting a vote to Maricopa County voters in November of 2022. Our current tax, Proposition 400, does expire December 31st of 2025. We've targeted November 2022 in part because some of our investments, particularly the operations side, transit operations in particular, you don't just turn that on and off overnight. And the need for funding assurance long-term is really important. And so providing those assurances, being able to plan and manage operations is really important. But we could defer to November 2024 if desired. We're going to spend the next couple of years developing our regional transportation plan. We do exist in an air quality conformity area, which requires us, we're in non-attainment, and so our transportation plan has to go through air quality modeling to ensure that we are on target from federal targets, to ensure that the pipeline of federal formula funds that do come into this region continue, that we're demonstrating that we are achieving and working towards attainment. And that's a several-month process. We'd expect to ask for ballot placement in early 2022 for, like I said, a vote in November of 2022. You'll see at the very top of this, something I just want to point out, we do require the need to go to the state legislature to ask for permission for a local vote to occur. We are unique in this setting. Only Maricopa County is treated this way in the state of Arizona. All other counties have the ability to ask for and solicit a vote on a sales tax for investments up to a full cent. We are capped at a half cent. We have to go to the legislature to ask for that permission. And actually, a lot of tenets associated with the governing of Proposition 400 are codified in state statute, which provide us very little flexibility. So we will have to, and you will see, each session indicated here at the beginning of each year, we will have to, at some point, go to the legislature to ask for that permission. The current feeling that we get from our regional council is that we want the planning process to mature a little bit more, have the tenets of a plan in place so that we can take that to the legislature about what we plan and see for our future. Perhaps more specifically, however, to the planning process, the next 18 months to 2 years, this illustrates some of those technical elements. I'm just going to verbalize high level what we're working on. Right now, we're at the early stage of this process. We have several concurrent tasks. We're doing a state of the state work with our consultant, looking at other peer regions as well. What kind of good ideas can we steal from them? I've mentioned and emphasized the funding shortfall. We use a very small amount of funding resources here, type in kind, to deliver the regional transportation system that we enjoy. Many of our other regions use a variety of other funding mechanisms. We want to learn from them what works and how they deliver their infrastructure. Who's responsible for the maintenance of freeway and highways in other regions? That will be really informative to our regional council as we weigh some of these trade-offs. As I've mentioned, we are currently doing existing and future needs assessments, not only just in partnership with our member agencies with the call for projects, but our partners as well, Valley Metro, as well as the Arizona Department of Transportation, and pulling together what will ultimately be a catalog of needs. And then we'll use that to better identify a performance-based plan. What are the solutions that most drive us towards the outcomes that we want for this region? And then we'll do some scenario planning, and that it will include testing against some what-if scenarios.
Good Lord.
Mute the phone.
Didn't like what you said.
I get it all the time. We'll do some what-if scenarios, particularly given the uncertainty of the future, but we also want to test different funding packages. I think one of the questions we get asked a lot is, what can I get for this amount of funding? We'll be able to play through some of those scenarios later this year into winter. Then next year, really based on all of that analysis and the feedback that outpours from it, we will start to develop that strategic investment strategy and ultimately the full regional transportation plan by the end of next year that can be accepted and go into an air quality conformity process. All along, we'll be doing stakeholder and public engagement. We want to come out to all the communities within the region, hear what constituents want, especially in the front end this spring on visioning, and better use that opportunity to set really what the goals and objectives of what we really want to achieve in this region for its prosperity 20 and 30 years from now. You know, it's not really about making my life better tomorrow or your life better tomorrow. Ultimately, what it is making some of the youth that you just celebrated tonight, we're making decisions. The responsibility for me and my team is making good decisions for their future. And so long-range planning is hard because we don't necessarily realize the outcomes immediately, but good planning delivers important futures. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Mayor Dickey, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. So much good information there. Do we have any questions? Yes, Councilman?
Well, I've got a few comments and a couple of questions. First of all, welcome, Audra. Audra and I worked together on SPAC. She preceded me as chairman of SPAC, and as you can see, is incredibly knowledgeable. And I'm wondering why you even took the job after hearing this excellent presentation. I've got to say, this makes me angry. It makes me very angry. You know, to paraphrase, it's you know, the legislature fiddles while the communities burn. My understanding is we have tremendous surpluses at the state level. Apparently, taxes have been reduced for business. It's like they're paying absolutely no attention whatsoever to this. I think it's outrageous, and I can't state that strongly enough. A couple of questions. Are we getting any federal revenue for any of this, any help?
Yes. Mayor Dickey, Councilmember Magazine, yes, it's an important point to clarify. The half-cent sales tax is only a portion of the funding portfolio that we use to deliver the freeway network, the transit network, and arterial network. In fact, about half of it is federal funding. It's formula-based, and so it comes through our region based on formula. And we greatly rely on those federal dollars to leverage a local investment to deliver. There is some discretionary money. Every now and then there's some grant opportunities, but quite frankly on the margins. Our high-capacity transit network relies heavily on enabling through a capital investment grant program, but that's also competitive nationally, and there's only about $2 billion of that available each year. And again, when you carve that up, there's just not a lot, and we're left with crumbs.
I think you said that the amount of revenue available declined by 40% because of the last recession, but that probably doesn't include inflation. if you take 40% of the total and reduce it by that amount, isn't it actually less than that when you key in inflation? And we're looking ahead several years, so inflation has to take a bite out of that.
Mayor Dickey, Councilmember Magazine, that does include inflation. So this is our projection with inflation included. Cumulative, a 40% decrease. You'll see the timeline associated with this graphic as well. The departure between the projections, the original projections back in 2003 and what we project, actual previous and what we project for the next 5 years.
Just another comment. Visioning is wonderful, but visioning is meaningless if you can't do anything with the results. We've seen that ourselves year after year after year, when, as you know, Audra, we went through visioning and we went through at SPAC, we made recommendations, and the number one recommendation, of course, was to deal with our financial situation, which we haven't done, and as a result, we've got maybe $2 million for roads. We need a minimum of 7. We know that other organizations in town have gone through visioning processes. I'm not sure it's worth the paper it's written on. And I know this has got to be discouraging to you in the position you're in. I'm hoping you're going to fix it.
No pressure. If I might just respond, Mayor Dickey, Councilmember Magazine, I couldn't concur more. I actually think and hope that the visioning effort actually just provides another bit of information. Quite frankly, our neighbors and constituents get it. You saw that slide. The research that we've already done in values mapping show a need and a reflective need for increased transportation funding, a willingness to contribute to that. There's a disconnect, perhaps, with the state legislature, but as much of that ground truth as I can provide and document to carry this message, I think we're really committed to.
One last question. The presentation was absolutely excellent, outstanding. And I guess my question is, have you had an opportunity to give this presentation to any of the legislature, any of the committees? And if so, what was their response?
Mayor Dickey, Councilmember Magazine. This particular presentation has not been presented directly to the legislature. We have been working over the course of the last 2 years with members of the legislature. In fact, we had anticipated, our regional council had given us direction to prepare to go to enabling, what we call enabling legislation, and to go to session this year to provide us that opportunity to have a local vote made locally. And then once we saw some of these numbers, I think that gave our mayor some pause and wanted to better calculate what our ask was really going to be of the legislature, in particular that question about a half cent. By statute, we are maxed, we are ceilinged at a half cent in this county, unlike all the other counties in the state. And I think we wanted to provide a little bit more conversation associated with what we were really going to ask of the legislature. We have provided some stark realities, including that $7 billion deficit. Our mayors testified in front of Mr. Campbell's committee but a couple weeks ago to talk specifically about the maintenance and operations needs, both at a freeway and highway level, but also what our mayors and you are seeing in your own communities and the deteriorating infrastructure and how HERF is just not able to satisfy those growing needs. Well received. Mr. Campbell has pushed a bill that hopes to remedy by doubling the gas tax. It's made it out of committee, which is one major hurdle. I'm not certain how much farther that will go.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Other comments? Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Audra, so, yeah, excellent presentation. Thank you for that. And I was going to ask more about the half-cent cap, so it would just take a separate action by the legislature to increase that then, a separate bill? Is that what you are saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, so that could happen, right? I mean, you're, okay. And then the other question, has there been any discussion in Pinal County of any kind of a tax down there since they're now part of MEG or at least part of Pinal?
Mayor Dickey, Vice Mayor, great question. Pinal County is actually the only county in the state that has fully obligated their full cent for transportation. They were successful a couple of years ago for an added half cent. It is tied up in some litigation currently, although they've won one hurdle very recently. Those fundings proceeds have been collected over the course of the last couple of years. It's sitting in escrow. The reality, although that is a full cent in Pinal County, the economic market in Pinal County is dramatically different. And so when you look at what a half cent or a 1 cent in Pinal County can generate, juxtaposed to what a half cent or a full cent in Maricopa generates, is considerably disproportionate. And so their tax, while fully executed at a full cent to help enable some investments they have already identified, does not meet a growing need and a growing population, especially in the portion of what's Maricopa Association of Governments regional area, that Santan Valley in particular. There's rapid growth and there's not funding available to meet those needs.
Councilman?
Thank you. Audra, great presentation. Thank you. The information is well presented. Thank you. And you talked about the gas tax briefly. It came out of committee, and you're feeling like it might not continue?
Mayor Dickey, Councilmember Brown, I hate to be put on the spot for a political question, but I will tell, it's made it out of the committee. Mr. Campbell's giving it a 50-50. I'll just say the facts. We have a governor who, in their State of the State, indicated that there will be no increase, no new taxes, period, on his watch. And so I think it has a tough row to hoe, quite frankly. It is intended to double the gas tax over a period of 3 years. So it's an incremental increase as well as a parity measure. So for the alternative fuels, electric vehicles, that they would be having some skin in the game for road maintenance as well. This is not its first time. It's been, this is a reoccurring bill that Mr. Campbell has previously introduced. I think there's a lot of support, particularly from industry, business sector. I just don't know if there's political will there to move it.
I see. Well, for my household, we've talked about it at length, and I would support it. I will assure you. Would this gas tax help us overcome that $7 billion deficit?
Mayor Dickey, Councilmember Brown, it will. It will not completely close that gap. The added element that I failed to mention is it would be indexed as well, so there would be a cost of inflation aspect associated, so we're already kind of following along with the economy. It doesn't close it enough, but it makes a big dent, and so that $7 billion that we've already identified just for freeways and highways, another couple billion on the shortfall for member agencies in terms of local roadway needs, it would certainly help alleviate at least that $9 billion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Grady?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We'll get into this a little bit later at the evening, but I just want to let you know one of the bills we want to talk about tonight was seeking council support of 2899, which is the gas tax that we just talked about.
That bill would need a 2/3 majority, right, to pass, because anything that raises revenue. So even if it got through, though, we have kind of gotten the message. The projects that didn't get funded, obviously we still have 4 years to go or so. So how do you see that happening? Do you make those decisions as you go along, like don't even bother starting one or start one, but try to get other funding, or is there a process to that?
Yeah, Mayor Dickey, members of council, we have active program management. We have those 3 major programs that I've already identified. The freeway program, which is 56% of the tax, 33.3% to transit, and then another 10.5% for arterials. I think we're really pragmatic. We stage a project from design all the way to construction, ensuring that it's fully funded, and we don't move that. If there isn't a guarantee of funding, we don't want to waste resources when they're this precious. With the freeway program, we unfortunately just had to rebalance out another $1.2 billion last year. The flip side of a great economy is costs increase, and in some projects, those costs doubled with bid openings, and so that required us to push out another $1.2 billion out of the freeway program. What we have done is staged some of those projects, so in case there is a change in the economy in terms of the market, or perhaps an influx in funding that's made available, we've queued some of those projects that make the most sense and are enabled to come in quickly. And are positioned well, so we're doing some of that pragmatic planning on our end. But we do active program management and bring it through our Transportation Policy Committee and Regional Council on a monthly basis, tweaking the program on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. One thing that you mentioned about the legislature and getting it past is that it's sort of a chicken egg thing, that it's hard to know what to do, like, because in order to give us, giving us permission to ask voters is one thing, but let's just put that aside, that we need their permission to ask voters, but then they want to see the projects, they want to see what it's going to be before they give us permission to ask, but that's a lot of work and a lot of money, and some of the things we talk about with studies, how do you get all that information together, which might not even be as relevant in 5 years when we actually have to do it. So so I know that it was a difficult thing at MAG, because they wanted to move ahead and say, let's just get the permission and then we can dig right in. But then the legislators are like, we want to see what that is, and then it's like, you have to do an awful lot of work to figure out what that's going to be. So it's kind of a conundrum, but we really appreciate all the work that you've been doing, and that you're so participatory with all of the mayors and all the towns, and everybody's got different needs, obviously. I think, did you look like you were going to ask a question? I thought.
Are you trying to talk me into a future study?
Maybe, yeah.
You never know.
Okay.
Oh, Mike, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Audra, the half-cent cap, was that instituted back in the Prop 300 days, or was it a more recent thing, or?
Yeah, Mayor Dickey, members of council, vice mayor, that came in Proposition 400. Also codified in state statute. We're in about 5 different parts of state statute. Just Maricopa County, just governing for this tax. No other county has this. Codification of those percentages: 56% for freeways, 33% for transit, 10.5% for arterials. We have a programming process that's articulated. So our life cycle project process that Mayor Dickey mentioned, where we have to ensure constant management so that we are adjusting the program based on available resources, so we cannot have a program that's out of balance if we have more funding or less funding, so we have to do that on an annual basis. We also have to go through an audit process every 5 years to ensure that we're doing what we intended to, that we promised, or we're making good on our promises, and so there's a high bar for which we have delivered in this region, but is distinctly different than other counties' provisions, so just to note that.
Yeah, thank you. So since you were put on the spot earlier, I'm just wondering, I mean, what are the chances any better of getting that half-cent cap changed to increase, or the gas tax? I mean, or is it kind of,
Right, so Vegas. Mayor Dickey, members of council, they are the facts. The reality is infrastructure is deteriorating, and our constituents won't tolerate that. Our business community won't tolerate that. I think the big question that for the legislature is, are we going to own our part of the responsibility, which is also in state statute for at least the freeway network and the gas tax as it is concerned, or will we give the permission to turn that responsibility over to the mayors in this region at a localized level to increase funding? It is a huge trade-off. I will tell you that our mayors are not at all excited about taking on the responsibility of maintenance and operations of the freeway network at all. And so that's been frustrating, but the reality also, we haven't seen any movement either, aside from the bill being introduced and getting out of committee. So we're going to be at a point where there are some tough questions and trade-offs, and it's going to have some economic consequences. I hope we don't get to that point.
I would think with the half-cent cap that you could easily argue that if they lift that, and it ultimately still has to go to the voters, and it's up to the voters to approve the proposition. So, I mean, to me, that's still democracy at work. I just sometimes don't understand some of these things.
Mayor Dickey, Vice Mayor, a potential outcome also of Mr. Campbell's bill is that it doesn't go to the governor for signature. It goes and is referred to a ballot, maybe this fall, so that the statewide gas tax solution might be on voters' ballots and not in the state legislature. So both of those are opportunities that could be considered.
Councilman Spellich?
Thanks, Mayor. I got Sharna on my mind. That's scary. What I like to hear is the fact that, as I preach up here, I think everybody should have skin in the game, and that everything should be fair and equitable. I think that ADOT yesterday, I don't know if a lot of folks know, stopped issuing the hybrid license plates for cars and everything, and I think that people who have those vehicles use the roadway just as much as I do in a gas burner, So I would like to see that spread across the board. I'd like to see people that have hybrids and electric cars pay just as much as other people. So that's just my comment.
That's in that too. Councilman?
Just a quick comment. I don't know how many of you saw the article in Republic yesterday or today about the increase in the gas tax. My reading of it is that the chances are slim to none.
On that happy note, anything else? Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and Audra's also makes herself available for questions and to contact her or anybody at MAG. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Ready to go on? Next, we have our call to the public. Do we have any cards?
We do.
Okay.
The first one is Clyde Hurdig.
Hi there.
Just an aside, the free trade agreement in Canada is called the CAMUSA.
I heard that this is all, the Canada people have it beginning with the Canada. We have it starting with the U.S. and Mexico has it starting with Mexico. So, yes.
I have two matters. The first one I have brought to council, and it's not directly able to be dealt with by council, but it's about the glare of the lights from the high school. And I've been talking to the superintendent and assistant superintendent at the high school for quite a few years, from back at 2015 or so. Ted Blank actually brought the superintendent to my house to look at them from above, and we were assured at one point that they were going to do something, and they never did. So I just wanted to mention, if anyone is talking to anyone at the high school, perhaps you could mention to them that maybe they could do something for us. The second thing is, I have noticed recently that the sheriff has been doing more speed enforcement, which I applaud, and I'm very happy about. We enter onto Palisades at a point where, just past the high school, where there's a hill there, and it's very hard to see the cars when they come by. The other thing that I was wondering if council can talk to the sheriff's office about is noise enforcement. A number of vehicles, especially it seems like motorcycles, during the middle of the night are driving down Palisades, sometimes vehicles with loud stereo systems, and we keep our bedroom windows closed, and even so, I'm woken up. Sometimes these motorcycles can be probably a half, maybe a mile away even, and I can hear them, and then they seem very loud. So I was just wondering if that could be brought up with them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do you want to say anything, Grady?
Yes, I just want to let the gentleman know that we are addressing that. We've had other complaints from other residents, particularly about the motorcycles. So what we do ask is, if you do hear this, if you can call the non-emergency number for the sheriff's office, only so that we can track patterns, so that we can try to make sure that we have enforcement. I'll give you an example. We've been having motorcycles reported that they're coming in during the daytime. We asked people to let us know, and I was able to forward on to the sheriff's office that last Saturday, 32 motorcycles roared down Saguaro at about 11 a.m. And so now they're going to start looking at having patrols there. So we do have a noise ordinance that does prohibit this, and so that's the only reason why we ask that you would call that in, so that if it is a pattern, it's not so random, we can try to go and try to enforce it when we have it happen. Does that make sense?
Yes. I have called, and I was told, like at night, I did call once and was able to talk to someone, and they said that, where is it happening? And I said, well, they just drove by. It's someone needs to be there, not, you can't really go there afterwards because there's no one there.
Well, I'll give you an example. Where I live, I'm in the middle of a block, but through the washes and all that, I hear sometimes the motorcycle traffic at night driving down Fountain Hills Boulevard. And so as an example, I can give the cross streets where that's happening and the approximate time. So that's all I'm asking is, if you can do that, then we can follow up. you could, I would be happy to also talk to you offline too, and get more details. So I'd be happy to do that too.
Okay. I also did try to call the non-emergency number, and it was not during business hours. And I left a recording because I wanted to know, after business hours, how do you call a non-emergency? And I don't know what the correct phone number
So
is.
just on your speaker's request form, did you put your name and phone number so I can follow
Yes.
up with you?
Yeah.
I will do that then.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have any more cards?
Yes. Karen Farkas.
Hi.
I'm here actually to give kudos to council for the decision to allow Ted Blank and his intrepid crew to do a test painting of 20 of the bollards along the lake. That was done, I believe, on the 16th and 23rd of February. They cleaned them, they masked them, they painted them. It was a very Herculean task, and although I have no visual measuring devices other than my eyes, I can say, from my perspective, there is way less glare while walking past those areas. And if any of you have not yet gone and checked it out, I encourage you to do so. It makes it much more pleasurable to look around when you're walking around the fountain, rather than just looking down at your feet, which you have to do anyhow because of the wildlife. But it is much more pleasurable, and to my perception, there's no less visibility on the sidewalk. Now again, I'm measuring with my eyes, but it is a pleasure, and I want to thank you for allowing that test to happen, and I'm looking forward to all 200 and some bollards being treated in a like manner. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any others?
Yes. Juan Gonzalez.
Hi.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, I'm here because I got the package from the hospital construction across the street from my place, from Senor Taco. And I mean, I'm very happy about got approved after nightmare going back and forth and everything. But I have a big concern that I want to bring up to your attention. The problem that I see after reviewing the plans on Trevino, if you, most of you know, because of lack of parking on the plaza from 12 years ago, my employees and lots of the customers have been using Trevino as a temporary parking to come into my establishment, McDonald's, the pizza place, just name it, okay? And again, after reviewing those new plans about how is it gonna be set, I'm begging for a reconsideration of that by allowing enough space on both sides to continue to our customers to be able to park right there. If that doesn't happen, and everybody brags about bringing businesses and everything, I can see my business with a very bad impact about losing customers. So honestly, I need your help by reviewing again that and make sure that there is a temporary parking on sites. A big percentage of my clients in the morning are people who come to work in town, just landscaping, painters, just name it. They all have big trailers, and there is no way they can come into our parking lot. Now, we've been doing business like that for 12 years, and I agree, new business is coming into town. But by allowing that, please do not make the other ones who've been, all businesses to get damaged or get a bad impact because of that. It is very important that you reconsider again that. I'm already struggling. Well, now things are better with my other location with the issue with the parking lot from Starbucks. And you guys don't have any idea how stress is to go to work and expecting a fight because someone isn't respecting our parking spot. Don't make this happen again. I know that it's not on the plan, on the agenda, but as soon as we find out about this meeting, I said, it's the time to come and speak up as a business owner and as a resident. Okay, so please reconsider. I hope you make a good decision and help us. It's here with me, the landlord, Jim Gilligan, so he's gonna.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz?
Jim Gilligan.
Hi.
Thank you for the time tonight. I co-own the center. We've been owners since 1995. And I'll try very hard not to repeat what Juan has said, but it is a big concern. It's been a concern for years. And we know we're underparked, McDonald's and us are. But when it was built, it was an approved use. And that's probably the biggest challenge we have is what to do with the cars. As Juan has said, particularly the landscape trailers, it's tight in there. When we worked with the town on the Trevino and not Trevino, well, a little bit of Trevino, Saguaro and Shea, we used to have the old, I'll call it a pork chop, when you used to take that right onto Shea. So a lot of it was redone at that time, and I know Circle K, who I'm not even sure even knows about the agenda the next time you meet that this is up. I just got my letter last week, and I did call Mr. Harrell, and it went to, my case, it went to an old P.O. box. That is probably my fault. I found out that the assessor's website has my old P.O. box on there from 8 years ago. So that's why we may be coming a little late, and hopefully it hasn't already been decided, because we're hoping that there could be some give and take a little bit on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure, it's Grady can say a couple things.
I'll just say just a few things. Letters did come out from the town engineer, just explaining that due to the stipulations, conditions tied to the hospital project, that was going to be prohibited. I would be happy for the Development Services Director and I to meet with those property owners there or the businesses. I think there's some opportunities for shared parking arrangements with some other businesses, either behind at the hospital or across over at MCO Properties or Realty. So we'll take a look and see how we can possibly help you out with this. So do we have your contact information with the clerk?
I have a phone number.
Okay. So we'll be in touch with you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Any more cards? Okay, thank you. We appreciate your concern. Next is our consent agenda. Can I get
Move approval.
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We'll start with our regular agenda item, which is about the IGA with the City of Phoenix about sales tax collections.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'll have David Pock, our Finance Director, give an overview of this item before you. Mr. Pock?
Hi.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'll make this fairly brief since we talked about it a little bit last week. Everyone knows the importance of TPT collection in the town, sales tax collection. It does account for about half of our operating fund revenue. So in the past, we've relied very heavily on voluntary compliance and collections, as well as our contract sales tax auditor that does provide some help there. Over the last few months, we've been looking at ways that we can improve that revenue, and some of that involved meetings with the Department of Revenue. And during one of those meetings, this suggestion was brought to us to contact City of Phoenix, that they had a system that basically took and aggregated all of the reports from the Department of Revenue so that they can be analyzed a little better. Excuse me. As you probably don't know, we get about a dozen reports from DOR. However, they're all separate. They're all done by month. We'll get one report for new licenses, one report for modified licenses, one report for renewed licenses. We'll get a report on return activity, what's been sales activity that's been reported. Get another one for audit collections, and just one of those reports, I looked at it before I came down, comes in Excel. There's about 12,000 lines per report per month. So it grows. What Phoenix has done is taken and built the database that they can upload all that information into, and then you can drill down into it. You can go from license information to how often somebody reports, to what their payment was last month, what deductions they took. So it is a nice system. When they built it, they basically allowed access to it to every city and every town in Arizona. Right now, there's 48 cities and towns that use their system. It's a modest cost. It's $2,000 buy-in, basically a setup fee one time, and then $375 a month after that. It's hopeful that that would be recovered in increased collections.
Assuming, yeah. Any questions, comments?
Mayor, I'll move approval of Resolution 2020-08.
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Were there any speaker cards? No? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, David. Next is a public art master plan. Grady.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, before you tonight is a request for consideration of adopting the Fountain Hills Public Art Master Plan. Recall before there was a presentation given by Community Services Director Goodwin on this topic, had basically most of the elements that you see in the plan tonight, but the plan itself was not ready for prime time at that time. She also has with her tonight co-chairs from the Public Art Committee, Dory Wittrig and Carol, and then also Jenny Willergod, who is also on the committee. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Goodwin, who will give a brief report on this item.
Thank you, Grady. Mayor, Council, we're back tonight to hopefully be short and sweet. We thought we would go through a couple of quick reminders just to kind of remind everyone where we were when we left off, follow up on the few items that were directed by Council, and then open it up for questions, and then hopeful adoption of our resolution. So, jumping right in, just as a reminder, sort of a review, we have 125 pieces in our collection. This is where they're all located. We are, as a committee, making a number of proposed changes to the policy. And these are, again, these shouldn't be anything new. These are what we reviewed last time back in November. It's a reduced focus on acquisition and limited collection growth, stricter guidelines regarding the art donations, a proposed maintenance fee for non-developer donations, addition of terms for decommissioning art from our collection, both selling and or returning to the donor or artist. The Public Art Committee, with Council approval, would like to have the ability to recommend relocation of existing pieces. The addition of a staff liaison to the committee, increased input during the review process, established terms and conditions for memorials, and then increased communication with our development services team as well. We would like to include an application to help streamline and explain the process, a refocus on one-of-a-kind and original art, considerations for traveling and temporary installations, and the elimination of water-based art features. So all of this is kind of review from our last time. Last time we met, there was a couple of questions. I wanted to make sure we got those addressed. One was regarding the sale of art objects. Specifically, we did review this with the idea that it needs to be highly selective and discussed with the donor when possible, if that's something we need to do. And is high considerations given to different factors such as safety, extra maintenance, the age or the deterioration of the object, and a consideration of alternate acknowledgement if a piece does become decommissioned or sold. And really, the idea here is that if we are offered a piece by a community member that really doesn't have a place or a home within our collection, and they're comfortable with that, sometimes they just need to make a donation because they don't know where else to give it or offer it. We can act as that mediator to say, okay, we can accept it and then use it as a funding mechanism for future art and for the fund. And as long as they're okay with that and everyone's sort of on the same page, that's really what that would be used for. Another question that was received was the clarification about public display, making sure that if a developer puts in a piece of art, what is the requirement? And this is our exact language. It says that the location of the artwork should be in an outdoor location to allow unrestricted visibility by the public 24 hours per day. So just to make sure that everybody knows that that is the requirement and that is the verbiage in the policy. There was also discussion regarding the annual contribution from our general fund to the public art fund for the cleaning and insurance. Those are annual costs that are sort of expected year in and year out. The general fund has been making that contribution, and we would like to consider that the public art fund now assume that annual expenditure. The idea would be to maintain a balance that can handle about roughly $40,000 each year. Then lastly, the last real point of discussion was the developer contribution, and it was suggested that we have a sliding scale. The suggestion was based on the following. Any project that is valued at $1 million or less have a 1% obligation. Projects between $1 million and $10 million have a 0.75% obligation, and projects $10 million or greater would have a 0.5% obligation. That's what was discussed here. This is what we took back to our committee, reviewed, and each of these items have been added or worked into our policy. With that, that is our review and our follow-up. If there are other items or questions out there, now's our time to discuss those or address those for you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Comments? Oh, Councilman.
Yeah, I think this is well done, and it responds to what the council wanted. I just had one question. When you talk about visibility of the item for the public,
yes.
What about on private property?
Even on private property, it still needs to have visibility to the public. So, for instance, if a piece is installed outside of let's say a hotel for whatever reason, if it's installed outside of the hotel, it's still private property, but it's still viewable and accessible to the public.
And that's as the facility is being constructed, I assume, a hotel or whatever. What if it's been in existence for a while and there's a request to put something that's visible near that facility?
I would think that the same guidelines would apply. I'm going to look at something like a Plaza Fountainside where there's a number of pieces of art on that private property. If we were to look at adding another one onto that property, it would still fall within that same guidelines.
Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody that worked on this. It was my kind of my pet peeve that the money for maintenance and insurance came out of the general fund. So I truly appreciate you guys making it right.
Do we have any speaker cards? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have any speaker cards? No? Okay.
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2020-07 and direct staff to bring a revised public art sliding fee structure to council for consideration and approval.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thanks everyone who worked on it so hard. We really appreciate that a lot.
Good job.
Our next item is the pumper truck item. Grady?
Yes, I'll call the fire chief up to give a brief report on this. Mr. Ott?
Hi again.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. How are you? We visited this a little bit last week at the council retreat, and the current pumper truck that's at Station 2 meets the vehicle replacement policy criteria for replacement on the truck. It's got repairs that that take the value of that truck way less than 40%, which is what the policy calls for. I've had discussions with Director Weldy and Director Polk on how this fits into the vehicle replacement policy. It was slated to be replaced in 2 years. We've got it mostly funded out of our contributions from the fire department to the vehicle replacement fund. It will take a little bit of a fund transfer in those exact numbers. I'd have to refer to David Polk on that. But we do have a pumper that's available to us. It's local. We have looked at it a number of times. We brought it out last week, filled it full of water, drove it around town, had 2 different engineers, as well as Jeff Larson from the streets, who's our equivalent of the fleet mechanic for the town, and everybody's relatively impressed with how it works its way through the town. We refer to Golden Eagle as Man Hill. It's an 18% grade, and we had no issues with driving anywhere through there. We really feel that this pumper that's available meets all our needs and would be very similar to one that we would spec out if we were going to build a pumper. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions from council or speaker cards? Do we have any speaker cards? No? No, we talked about this at the retreat, like we said, so feel like we all pretty ready to vote then?
If I could just make one point, Mayor, sorry for interrupting. Just want to let the folks know too that we set aside money every year for all of our vehicles in anticipation at some point that they're going to be replaced. It's just a very affordable way of setting aside money, ensuring that we have the money to make replacements when it's necessary. Now, even though that this particular fire truck is being retired 2 years earlier, there is a trade-in value or an auction value that we'll be getting, and it will be either offsetting the cost or that money will go right into the replacement fund. Also, at the time that this was set up, this vehicle was set up for future value, not present value. We do have money in the fund to fully cover it. The transfer really is giving the expenditure authority to be able to have this happen this fiscal year because it was not programmed for this year. So I just wanted to clarify those points.
Thank you. So you can't bring the old pumper to CarMax or anything like that, though, right? I don't have to put it out there, but it should help at least. Any other discussion or motion?
Second.
Thank you. Do you want us to read that, or is that okay? Is okay?
As written.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Motion passes unanimously.
Do we know,
Thank you.
is Art voting? Haven't noticed.
You on the call?
I am.
Okay. Just want to make sure. You can talk anytime you want. Thank you.
I
Chief.
will. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Our next item is Grady, the painting.
Yes, thank you. Council members, Mayor and Council, you recall at the last council meeting, there were some questions about the contract for painting the library and community center. Essentially, it was $190,000 to do the exterior work of those buildings, and then also on the interior, there was an amount set aside or allocated for the interior of the library. Councilmember Dennis Brown offered to help try to research some of the questions that came up at the last council meeting and was in touch with me. He was able to be provided with a cut sheet and some additional background information. In researching this, he brought to light some further concerns that I want to continue to work with him on, but the one thing that I would like to recommend tonight is that the interior of the building be approved, because as you're aware that we've approved, or I should say the council has approved, recarpeting the library, and they have a schedule that they're trying to keep, and the interior painting is not part of the questions that we're trying to troubleshoot at this point. So with that, I would recommend that the council consider amending the suggested motion to have it relate to the interior of the library only, and talking to our town attorney, he believes that that is something that can be done.
Mayor, members of council, if I may, I think then if that is the council's desired motion, certainly it's up for discussion, then it would just be a simple move for approval of the contract in the amount stated, $20,887.08.
So it's all the same. Any speaker cards on this?
Yes, we have one from Ed Stizza.
Yes. Sorry. This was after the exterior painting. I'll comment, because they may answer all the questions.
I'm sorry?
Exterior painting on the community center. That's what we're talking about the interior, right?
No, this is the same item, so you're welcome to come up, yeah.
I thought it was going to be.
Well, we're just maybe going to change it to just the interior, but the whole, you can come up and speak to the exterior also.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, how are you guys? So, a couple questions I had after the last council meeting I attended, which was the process that, I realize this is under a cooperative, purchase agreement, and as far as the painting of the community center and the library. And it needs painted, obviously, as everybody knows, but I was real curious on some of the comments that were made on the painting. One was the actual cut sheet that you're talking about. Seems pretty funny to use epoxy instead of elastomeric here, and that's number one. The other processes that should definitely be, and I didn't hear this, this company should be also certainly pressure washing the buildings completely. They should be filling every crack. They should be certainly priming, and they should be doing 2 coats of paint, of top coat. And I was just curious if that was getting done in the actual bid. And, because obviously it's a concern on the fading around here and that. And then the second part of that was the colors. And I thought I heard that the painting company picked the colors. Is that part of the architectural committee? I have a question. Who picked those colors?
We can answer your questions because it's on the agenda, even if we don't move forward with it tonight. So Grady or?
Yeah, I'll address the color scheme. So essentially the colors were following what this building is. So all the colors you see on the buildings follow those, so that the beigey creamy color, the darker tan color, and the darker brown are actually on this building. And so we're trying to have the color schemes. I believe it's some like 6 or so paint colors that we have on the buildings right now over at the community center and the library. We're trying to match the town hall.
Oh, that would be.
Which if you look at it, it's much more, it's scaled back. It's not quite as loud. And when those were painted, it was, at the time, it was very nice and such. But over time, like the purple's faded, and there's like a peachy color. There's also, which I don't understand why it was done at the time when it was new, but the window frames that came from the manufacturer that had the baked-on enamel that were black were painted the fleshy color around that, and I don't understand why that was done, because that's typically, it's a long life enamel that's baked on that. So anyways, that's going to put the windows kind of back in the condition that they should have been originally. They wouldn't have had to be repainted probably if they had stayed that way. So at least on the interior. And then you had another couple points. Could you repeat your questions so that the director can?
The other one was the sheen, what you guys were going to end up using. I seen that PP&G was the paint you were going to use, and I assume you're going to comment on these. That's why I was.
Yeah.
Justin, you
No,
want
not
to
at all.
address these questions?
We'll address the paint and what the prep work will be, and then we'll go on. But thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Good points.
Thank you.
So the prep work, like the power washing and that kind of stuff?
Madam Mayor, if I may, and Facility Supervisor Raymond Reese could not be here tonight. He had an obligation. After this session started, he brought to me some comments. I went outside with him. We have a couple of things that we would like to clarify, and then I will answer that gentleman's questions. Into the discussions and all of the exchange of data as of recently, when we drilled down into the documents, we discovered that the Mojave contract did not have an elastomeric line item. And so it was the closest approximate price for epoxy paint using elastomeric that they could. But in the cut sheets and the specifications, they actually, they describe and itemize an undercoating, which is the primer of elastomeric, and then the final 2 coats, which are the paint, are elastomeric products. Those are in the cut sheets that they provided to us, that the town manager shared with Councilmember Brown. This is in the very, very fine details, and it's a lot of text, but we did discover that, and the painting company provided that to us in a highlighted format. Unfortunately, we were not able to get that to the town manager prior to this session starting, so I wanted to share that with you. To answer that gentleman's questions, as part of paint prep, we would clean the buildings, fill all the cracks, and take care of any other blemishes or minor structural issues that might be noticed as part of any painting project for all of the buildings on the town campus and all of the buildings that the town owns and maintains.
Justin, I think the question really is not we, but that's part of the contract.
Yeah, that's correct. I should have done a better job of explaining that. The contract has an obligation to meet those requirements.
Thank you. Councilman Brown?
You do realize that's a total turnaround of information than we had 2 weeks ago?
I do, sir.
Okay, because 2 weeks ago, it was epoxy paint because the stucco was falling off and we couldn't use an elastomeric over. I mean, it's a total turnaround from what we were told 2 weeks ago.
I understand
yes,
that.
I do have those cut sheets, and I thank the town manager very much for those, and
I still like to get down to the bottom of this and kind of figure out what's going on, so I'm not comfortable with this being considered any further other than the interior of the library.
Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilman Brown, hats off. I've been calling him and texting him. I was really concerned about that because I was in the process of getting estimates on my own home, and I was told that elastoplasmeric was best. So hearing this and this gentleman speaking to it, obviously he has knowledge about it. The also thing that I'm very troubled with that I talked to Councilman Brown about is the warranty. We're spending $190,000 to get a 12-month warranty. The least option that I had as far as price-wise and goes, the warranty was a minimum of 5 years, and it went up to as much as 10 years. So I would like the warranty of the product and the workmanship and everything to go much longer than 12 months. And I talked to Councilman Brown about that. And I think when we're spending this kind of money, we have to make a really sound decision.
Councilman?
Maybe I shouldn't be wading into this, but when Councilman Brown said it's totally different, I'm in the dark. I don't quite understand what's going on.
lights are on.
Well,
So here it is. Here's the entire story. When we the very first thing that caught my eye was the amount of money to paint the buildings, and because that is a big number. The buildings are big, but that is a big number. And then Raymond got to talking about, well, part of it is because they're going to use an epoxy paint. Well, and I received all of the cut sheets for the interior and the exterior and the metal, but I didn't receive anything on the epoxy paint. And that came to me today?
It was yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday evening. And it's Aquapon, it's a good product, but the problem with using an epoxy paint on our buildings, there are two problems that have been brought to light. Number one, if you use an epoxy paint, it's hard to find any other paint that will actually bond to it. You know, you put epoxy paint on your floor and it will last forever. The epoxy paints fade much more quickly. They don't have the acrylic backing in them that the elastomeric or a true acrylic paint would have. And the second reason that they discouraged the epoxy was because the porousness of the way the buildings were stuccoed with a blown type stucco opposed to a hand trowel stucco leaves deeper voids. And the people that I consulted with had concerns about if you could even get an epoxy paint to work in this process. Now, what we're being told this evening has nothing to do with epoxy paint at all, with the exception of the Mojave contract doesn't have any elastomeric line items in it. So they don't even recognize it and can't price it. And they were saying, well, maybe this epoxy would be a comparable price to, and well, let's start juggling some balls and see which one falls out of the air first. Because I can't tell you if what this epoxy paint costs versus a good elastomeric. And so long story short, I think we take this $190,000 off the table until we can get some answers and we really know what we're paying for.
I really appreciate you getting involved in this.
Guys, would you address the warranty thing?
I would be glad to. On their contract, they call for a 1-year warranty, and in the state of Arizona, as best as I know, being a general contractor, anything that I touch, anything that I go in and work on gets a 2-year warranty. And so the painting is no different than that. It gets a minimum, per the Register of Contractors, a 2-year warranty. Almost every painting company that I have dealt with will either give you a 5 or a 10-year warranty depending on the product that you put on the house. And I could go into a 20-minute oration on that too. But so at a minimum, the ROC is going to tell you you get 2 years. So that's what I know. I'm glad we're taking it off the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would you like, oh, Mike?
Well, getting back to the interior, have we heard anything back from the Friends of the Library on a possible contribution, or?
Justin, have you?
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, they have not yet, as of tonight, committed to any funding for this project.
And I would like to just point out that despite whether they pay or not, our residents are getting a smoking deal on the fact that they staff, pay benefits, and provide for all that on the interior of that building. So we're not operating, we don't have the operating costs of the library services. And so that's a very expensive service that we're getting. And part of our obligation for them being there was we built the building and we obligated ourselves to maintaining the building. So as far as I'm concerned, $20,000 doing the interior of the building is a real steal when you consider what it costs on an annual basis to operate a library system.
Can I get a motion to approve the interior painting on $20,887.08?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And we'll come back with some answers that have been raised tonight.
Art Call said nay.
Hey, Art, could you please clarify your vote? Sorry.
I said aye.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
My mistake. My mistake.
Very good. Thank you. Our next item is about Golden Eagle Park. Grady?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, the item before you, you recall that we had a presentation by the engineering firm of J.E. Fuller, Hydrology and Geomorphology. It's quite a mouthful. Anyways, they gave a presentation on what they believed were two different aspects of the Golden Eagle Park and trying to address some of the drainage issues that we have in the park. I'm going to have our Public Works Director go into this report on this item that is before you.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, we come to you tonight with what is a multi-phase program. We already know what the first couple of unscheduled phases are, a couple of storm events that required an incredible amount of funding and effort on the part of the mayor and council and the staff to clean it up. After the presentation with the J.E. Fuller group to this group, we sat down and asked them if they could please come forward with a scope and fee for phase one. For phase one, we are considering the grading of the channels to a more adequate depth and width and the removal of sediment on the dam face to be critical and needing to be done sooner rather than later. So what we are asking you to approve tonight is the authority to enter into an agreement to get phase one done So sooner rather than later, we can go out to bid and have a contractor come in and remove all of that overburden in anticipation of any future storms, so we will have adequate storage and minimize the potential for backwatering from the face of the dam back onto the field. We will return at a later date with the next phase, which will include additional components for the mayor and council to vote on for the additional items lined out there, not only east of Golden Eagle Boulevard in the impoundment area of Golden Eagle Park, but also some difficult decisions we'll have to make on the west side and all three of the washes that feed into this area. I will certainly answer any questions that you may have to the best of my ability related to J.E. Fuller's proposal.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Do we have any speaker cards on this item? No? Okay, then the motion is kind of lengthy there. If you somebody want to give us a motion, please.
I'll move approval for the motion as written.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, everybody in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Next, we are going to talk about the Caterpillar loader and the broom. Grady?
Yes, Mayor and Council will recall that this item had been before you actually a couple times, and due to some concerns that were raised, we held off having any action. It was withdrawn. We most recently met with Councilmember Brown, who was able to answer, or we were able to answer, I think, all of his questions in their entirety. I'll turn it over to Mr. Weldy, who's going to go into detail as to what these pieces of equipment are and how they'll help both his department and the Community Services Department.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, as you know, we had this in front of you before. I unfortunately did not provide enough information that would allow you to make an educated or a best decision based on the requirements. We're going to first talk about the funding level. These two pieces of equipment are not just some immediate, we need these right now as a result of a couple of storms. The process for purchasing this equipment started several years ago when I was actually the street superintendent for the town of Fountain Hills. I noticed while doing my inventory and review of all of our equipment and our vehicles that we had a couple of pieces of equipment that were very, very expensive to replace. And in my opinion at that time, and shared by then Public Works Director, that there was an agreement there. One of them was our lift truck. It was very expensive and scheduled to be replaced at about $148,000. At that time, we were in the process of farming out our traffic signal maintenance to someone else, and the primary use for this was for traffic signals. So a decision was made at that time to not replace that vehicle. The next vehicle was our sign truck. It was a 550 four-door Ford pickup, and only one person operates it. I did not believe, in my opinion, it was necessary to replace that truck in its schedule with that big of a truck. So we did a little bit of research, and that one was very, very expensive, and I don't have the exact dollar amount with me, and I could dig through this text. However, it was considerably more than the $32,000+ we spent to actually purchase it. That is just part of a multi-year savings process that we have set aside in HERF funding. This is all HERF funding that purchases all of the street department equipment. We have reduced our overall cost consistently for several years in the use of our utilities, our fuel, and the amount of items that we purchase that, in our opinion now as a group, were unnecessary and we did not need to purchase. With that said, that's how we arrived at this dollar amount and the need or the ability to pay for this equipment. Now then, the most recent storm events, and prior to these two notable storm events that are often part of our conversation, we have had a need for the type of tractor described here, which is a grade tractor. We do have a backhoe. it is limited on what it can do in regards to grading. It's just not a good piece of equipment for that. We do have a few areas, some alleys and some shoulders that we still have to grade and maintain. And right now we have to rent a piece of equipment either through a contractor or a rental agreement to accomplish one of those tasks. Another thing that we could do, and we will do with this, is after storm events, we will now have 2 tractors that are designed for this purpose that will allow us to remove the sediment from the roadways and the intersections out of the road, and then subsequently return with dump trucks at a later date and remove that from the right-of-way. That describes the grade tractor we're asking for. The next item we're asking for is a Bruos power broom. This is not a street sweeper, and I don't want it to be confused with a street sweeper. This is a ride-on broom that allows us to remove sediment from the travel lanes and the shoulder and push it onto the side in long windrows or piles, and then pick it up with the aforementioned 2 pieces of equipment. Another thing that this piece of equipment is good for is sidewalk sweeping. We, in fact, most recently used a rented one on Palisades, just north of Shea on the northwest side, but we have also used it to clean the sidewalk now multiple times in Golden Eagle Park that runs from the southern parking lot around to the northern parking lot. It's a little bit wide and a little bit awkward, but when properly operated, which we clearly have the ability to do, it will remove the majority of debris off of that sidewalk. It will also be utilized in Fountain Park for some of the aforementioned droppings of our visitors from nature that leave them all over the sidewalk. So it's a multi-use tool for at least 2 departments, but we could also use it here in facilities and in our parking lot. This is an exhaustive explanation, but I understand after conversations with Councilmember Brown, I have simply failed to convey some of these message in these staff reports, and the intent is for us to not only do a better job with this type of thing, but also be more clear and have a better understanding of what we are presenting in regards to something as simple and should have been uncomplicated as painting. So with that said, I will answer any questions that you have related to these 2 pieces of equipment to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Councilman Brown.
Thank you. I would like you to go ahead and explain the water system that you're going to put on the broom.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Brown, this power broom comes with an attached at no additional cost. It's in the unit pricing. It's either a 300 or 400 gallon water tank that allows us to suppress the dust. So all the time this piece of equipment is operating, it's spraying water onto the broom attachment itself and also onto the surface that you're working. This minimizes the particulate matter that will be entering the air at that time. Not all of it, and depending on the severity, sometimes it'll look like we're not even trying. But the reality is, it does have a water suppression system built into it. And we do have a reputable water supply, potable, filtered, that we will fill it with.
Thank you.
As well, you'll use the water when you're cleaning Fountain Park sidewalks?
The idea is that you actually have to manually turn the water off from outside of the piece of equipment if you're not going to use it while in operation.
Okay.
So as soon as you engage the broom, the water comes on automatically. So you really have to want to turn the water off to not use it.
And the last question, or the last comment I would make, please explain, the other concern I had was having a qualified operator on the skip loader.
And absolutely, Councilmember Brown inquired as to whether or not we had qualified operators. He referenced myself because he clearly has seen me numerous years out here on these streets and nearly every piece of equipment we own. Jeff Pierce, the street superintendent, is highly qualified and can operate this equipment and does in the rented equipment. We also have Eric Brownham. He is a very high qualified operator. He can operate the backhoe, the Gannon, and the broom, and numerous other pieces of equipment that we do not own, but should we have to lease, rent, or borrow them in the future, we would have that ability. And then we have Jacob Bajorlin, who also trained over the last 2 storm events to operate the broom safely and efficiently, and he's also in training to operate the smaller of the tractors, which is the Gannon tractor.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Any questions or comments or speaker cards? No? Could we get a motion, please?
I move to approve the skip loader and the broom so Justin can sleep at night.
Well, we'll all second that. And can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the
Thanks so
opportunity.
much. The last agenda on the regular, of regular items is the legislative bulletin. I think we're going to ask for some go ahead on opposing and supporting 3 bills and opposing 1. So Grady, could you do that, please?
Well, I'll start off with the one we talked about earlier, around the time that Audra was presenting the Prop 400 extension. So before the council, before the legislature is a bill 2899, which I'm recommending that we support, which would double the gas tax from 18 cents to 36 cents per gallon over the next 3 years. So it'd be essentially 6 cents per year over the next 3 years. That would also have some sort of a increased license fee for electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles, hybrids and such as well. So just would open that up for discussion if any council members have any weigh in on that.
That addresses what you were talking about then, so. And this is something that the league is supporting. So if you're okay with that, we can send a note. It's a little hard to do these requests to speak because some of these bills are already through committee, and you don't get that opportunity online when it's waiting to go to the floor. So these
am I
just get
sensing
right
there's
to the source.
Am I sensing there's consensus on that for me to send through a message to the legislature on that? Okay.
Then we have the 2705, which was a league bill about addressing blight or property that's abandoned or not in very good shape. And we were looking to support that. And then the short-term rental bill, which is 1554. And then the only one that we were looking to oppose is 2404, because that is the one that says unless you increase square footage, the sales tax is point of sale. So a town like ours, where we don't have, a big box, it would really affect our projects. So we would like to try to oppose that, and the league opposes that one. 2404. It's called, anything that doesn't result in expansions of square footage goes to the point of sale.
The league and all the East Valley managers are all concerned about that as well.
And then if we do go ahead with these positions, along with the one that we did about the signs, the political signs, which was 2028, then Grady can send us the letters, and then
Yes.
that'll give us a record of what we've weighed in on, if it's okay with everybody.
I'm okay with that, but I would like to throw something out to the council just for discussion. And I know that the county wrote a fairly strong statement on the Second Amendment and the protection of our Second Amendment rights. I would like to have Fountain Hills also, even though it's already written and it's already been approved, I would like to have a statement from Fountain Hills sent to the county thanking them for what they're doing in support of the Second Amendment.
I agree.
So how does
I
that
would
work
agree
out,
with that.
Aaron, as far as,
Well,
with the...
Mayor,
with the-
members of council, I think we've at least, same as with these other bills, it sounds like there's at least some consensus with the council. I'm certainly open for other discussion, but since it's not really an agendized thing, not tied to a legislative bill, I don't know there can be a motion, but we at least have, sounds like some direction here.
Well, Mayor.
Can we discuss it or not? Yeah, because, well, it's not pending, wait, how is this written again? Pending legislation, or does it have to be?
Yeah, Mayor and members of council, if we could also bring it back for formal recognition at the next meeting, if
Okay.
sounds like there's a desire of 3 to at least do that.
Okay,
Does that work?
yep, thank you. Any other council discussion or direction to town manager?
Move adjourned.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thanks a lot.
I gave Mr. Gilligan my cards, and he gave me his, so he